It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand. Right.
And there they are, Basil the dog and Lagata the cat. Hi there, I'm Mike Nowak. There's no Peggy Malecki here this morning. In fact, I'm not really even here this morning. This is pre-recorded because, as we said last week, we're taking a day off. It's the holiday weekend, and I hope you're all having a great holiday weekend, and I hope I'm having a great holiday weekend right now. But we didn't want to leave you hanging if you're canning your tomatoes or baking cookies. A lot of you spend Sunday mornings with us. We love spending Sunday mornings with you. So we're streaming this live. It's kind of a best of show. We got a couple of segments I think you're going to like. Maybe you missed them when we first aired. But if you did, you can enjoy them today. And if you saw them already, well, you might enjoy them again. So we're going to start the show with the woman who wrote this book, The Humane Gardener, and that's Nancy Lawson. She was on the show back in June, and we talked about that book. And her sister, Janet Crouch, joins her late in the conversation because Janet took on a homeowners association in Maryland and won. And not only did she win, she got a state law passed about planting natives in one's own backyard against the people who wanted lawns. Yay! Wait, where's the dinger? Okay, we get a ding for that. And that will be the first hour of the show. And then in the second hour, we're going to go back to July when we talked to Debra Shore, who is a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. She was on to talk about what I described as Chicago's uneasy relationship with water. If you've just been paying attention this year, well, the hurricane Ida that flooded to the Northeast. They have their issues there. We have our issues here in Chicago as well. And as climate change rears its ugly head, things get dicier sometimes. So Debra Shore is going to talk about that. She's going to be with her science and policy advisor, Justin Hart, and we'll explain why even in a place like Chicago, water is an issue. And we have to be careful when it comes to high volume rainstorms and droughts as well. So we hope you enjoy both of those segments. We hope you're having a great holiday, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and then you were on the phone with me this week, and I'm like, I've got water spurting backwards out of my downspout entry as well. I'm like, the plumber's here, gotta go.
There might be a chipmunk stuck in there, so gotta go. And that should take us to our guest. I think that's a good intro.
Great transition.
I know it. Dead chipmunks in the gutters. And with that in mind, let us go to Nancy Lawson, the Humane Gardener. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show this morning, Nancy. Oh, wait. And I forgot to turn her mic on. So that would, yeah, let me help you with that. I popped it off before while we were getting ready. Well, in the madcap 5 minutes before the show starts. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to be anywhere on the day after. There's got to be a morning after. Um, I actually have a story about that, about Maria Moldauer. It's a WGN story. And she's saying there's got to no Maureen McGovern. That was it, right?
Maureen McGovern, yes.
Yeah, Maureen McGovern. Maria Moldauer did Midnight at the Oasis. Maureen McGovern was on Roy Leonard's show. I was engineering.
With WGN Radio in Chicago,
Right,
Nancy.
WGN Radio in Chicago. I engineered a GN for a long time. They didn't have a cart. They didn't have the music on tape. So they had a disc. They had a 45, actually. And they said, well, we got to play this. We want you to play this. So I put the 45 on. Forgot to change the speed from 33 1/3. Maureen McGovern is sitting in the studio, and the song begins, there's got to be a morning after. Sorry, Roy.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah,
That's when my mom turned the dial away.
That's right. When people started turning away from WGN Radio, it was me. Okay, it was because of me. So that's my Maureen McGovern. That's my brush with fame. Nancy is with us from the wilds of Maryland, so you're not getting this crazy rain, are you, over there? I hope.
No, it's a beautiful morning. Actually, I went outside this morning because it was so nice, and I was trying to calm my nerves for showtime. And what did I come across but a second box turtle mama
Oh,
laying her eggs. I was checking on
nice.
whether the cardinal flower was blooming yet, and I looked down at my feet. There she is, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I better not scare her. And so I parked my husband out there, and he's taking pictures and watching for me while we're on the show. But
Well, if he's got a good picture and he wants to send it along from this morning,
email it quickly.
Email it quickly. I've already dealt with DiMaio's photos, so I might have a chance to do that. This is a great introduction to what you do. Obviously, you've written this wonderful book, which we promoted earlier in the week, The Humane Gardener. And it's only in hardcover, folks, just so you know. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Hey, I got to have my bookmark sticking out. There we are.
oh, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've got my bookmarks sticking out there too. Okay, they're all.
No, but you missed my bookmark, Mike.
Oh, good bookmark. Yeah, I just rip up something, my bank receipts, and put them in there. So what? Well, as we start this, I want to start the way you do in your book, which is you were just like the rest of us, like a lot of people when you got into this gardening thing, which is to say you wanted some pretty flowers and you were doing what everybody told you to do, the conventional wisdom. And then you realized maybe this is not exactly the way this is supposed to work.
Yeah, and I think there were a couple times where there were probably multiple things that led to that sort of revelation. But once was when I planted butterfly weed because it was pretty. I don't think I knew about the connection with monarchs. I just found a seed pack, and my favorite color is orange. So,
Yay.
and then in
You get a
like
ding for that.
early May, which is really unusual, but early May one year, I found a monarch caterpillar already on
Wow.
one of the leaves, and then I looked it up. And then another time, I was just it was like had been a kind of a rough year, and I had kind of let everything go for a while because I was busy at work and everything. And I saw in the fall all these sparrows coming to the switchgrass that I had planted. And everything else in the yard didn't have birds and was kind of barren. And I was just, so I started thinking, well, that's because I don't have any place for them to hide or any layers in the landscape. I was planting annuals and vegetables, and they just all died back in the winter. And so I realized I need I need something that's year round. So I think that's kind of how it started.
And of course, there's nothing wrong with vegetables. We encourage that quite a bit on our program. But in concert, I mean, if you look out in my backyard, my vegetables are wherever I have a bare space, where there isn't a perennial of some kind.
Right.
And I just slam them in there, and they coexist pretty well usually.
And my vegetables are full of things flowering, so.
Yeah, and you need the flowers to bring the bees to pollinate the vegetables. So it all goes hand in hand.
So you know, you've been, since you've discovered this, that there weren't critters without certain kinds of plants. As you said, it was in the book, it's, you got to figure out what the plants are you need, and then the critters will come. Now, the problem with that, and you're a heretic, by the way, you want critters to show up in your yard. A lot of people are trying to keep them out of their yard. So what's the problem with that?
Well, if you try to be, first of all, the problem is that for me, it's really not up to us. We're also in their space. This is their home too. But overall, in the bigger picture, if you're trying to attract butterflies and bees and birds and the animals that you consider charismatic or pretty or unobtrusive, and then you need all this other type of habitat. You need dead wood. You need leaves in the ground layer. You need things that are going to also attract snakes, chipmunks, squirrels, other animals that people tend to fear because they don't know enough information about them, or they just automatically assume are invading their space. And you can't really have one without the other. Our yard is a testament to that. We have threatened bumblebees nesting in our habitat.
What kind of bumblebees are they?
American bumblebees, and they used to be really common even 20 years ago, and they've become more rare here and in the further south.
Yeah, in the Midwest, it's the rusty-patched bumblebee, which is disappearing. And they used to be everywhere here, and now you can't find them. So the same thing is happening with the different species.
Yeah, a lot of bee species. I mean, and they haven't been studied for that long, the native bees. Some of the bumblebees have, but we were so focused on honeybees for so long. And so American bumblebees, for example, what they really need for their nesting habitat, what they really like is tall grasses that have fallen down. I mean, that's a really good place for them to nest. And as we know, that's something people wouldn't mow or cut down. So,
yeah, you write about this in your book, and what you say here is, by these conventional standards, my property is a disaster. It's now filled with members of wildlife-sustaining species that have been cut down, dug up, sprayed, and otherwise brutalized on this continent for decades, sometimes centuries. It's home to any animal who wants to make a life here and refuge to others just passing through. Only two things are unwelcome: chemicals and invasive vegetation known to supplant wildlife habitat. Everyone else, from smartweed to milkweed, from ground beetles to groundhogs, has an open invitation. That's a pretty remarkable statement. A lot of people would say, well, what about rabbits? What about deer? What about cat? Or rather, Peggy would say, what about chipmunks? Because she has a terrible problem with chipmunks. And would you say that's not a problem, or how would you address that?
Well, I would ask first what the problem is and what your circumstances are.
Peggy, you want to go into that just for a second?
Well, in the case of the whole, it's not just my house; it's the whole area. Lots of chipmunks, kind of out of balance as far as how many are there, and lots of burrowing under everything, tunnels, and of course then eating lots of things too, because, they're going to eat, obviously. So it winds up being just lots and lots of burrowing that running under the patio, running under everything, getting under people's foundations, front porches, not just my house. But there's a large population of them.
Yeah, so I would wonder if this is if this has been going on for years and years, if this is recent, because chipmunks are kind of on a boom and bust cycle. And so maybe it's not really quantifiable, but maybe every 7 years or so, there's a boom for 2 or 3 years. And it coordinates with the masting years of trees, and they can get a lot of the things that they like to eat when there's a lot of nuts around. And so, and then in the subsequent years, you'll see more hawks or more foxes coming because they have more chipmunks to eat. And chipmunks are actually solitary, and so they have usually half an acre to maybe 2 acres is their territory, and
so
they
there's not gangs of roving chipmunks out there
but they are close enough that they chase each other.
So there's probably a lot of supplemental food sources. There's probably people with bird feeders and things like that that are attracting them. So there was a study, I think in 2016, on chipmunks' activity increasing a lot in the presence of bird feeders. And so it doesn't necessarily mean they're all living in that space where you see them. They're coming from these different territories around the community, and congregating and aggregating. And so there's things that you can do to prevent that. You can take down your bird feeders and just have the trees and the other food for them. I mean, chipmunks also, they are omnivores, so they eat snails and other not insects, but invertebrates that like to eat plants. And so they can help you out too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like a lot of critters, there's some good with them. Folks complain about slugs all the time, but slugs are a food source for some animals. The slime that they produce is important to aggregate soil, and there are other things that are good about pretty much anything that's in your yard.
It's when it gets out of balance that it starts becoming noticeable.
Yes, exactly. And I'm really happy to see a slug, because we had tons of them when we first moved here. There were hostas already here and stuff, and I don't see them much anymore, just because they're hiding in so many places. They're in the leaf layer. They help with breaking down the leaves, and they're not that present. They're getting eaten.
Yeah. Let's while we're on the subject of bird feeders, I got an email just yesterday from a listener and viewer who alerted me to the state of Indiana.
That was Deb?
Deb Moulton. Thanks, Deb. And the state of Indiana is asking people to cut back on the bird feeders because of this mysterious disease that has begun affecting birds. I found an article in The Guardian yesterday. It says mystery illness strikes down birds across the U.S. and the Midwest, and it's the symptoms are birds suffering from what they call crusty eyes, swollen faces, and inability to fly. And so some of the scientists anyway are encouraging people to cut back on the bird feeding until we can find out what's going on, because when birds congregate, they spread it amongst each other. Are you familiar with this, Nancy?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in my book, happening out west at the time that I was writing that. There were big outbreaks, I think, in California. And it is another reason to uh, not have bird feeders and instead have native plants. I mean, I know bird feeders can be uh, lovely. You can learn to ID birds that way, and you can just learn to enjoy the creatures in your yard, but they cause a lot of conflict with mammals and they can cause a lot of harm to birds. And there's several different diseases that birds can get from feeders because there's so many birds congregating there. It's
Yeah.
easy transmission. I mean, it's we've experienced that in the human population. You know, when you have too many of the same species in one place, that's what can happen. And I saw that a lot this fall. I saw a lot of people posting about pine siskins.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at their bird feeders, like 50, 60 at a time, because we had a unusual year with a mass migration through here. And I was just wishing that they had more plants for them instead. You know, I'd see these pictures of feeders in mostly lawn yards, and that's the only place they could go to. Whereas here, you know, they were up in the trees, they were climbing along the trees and getting insects, they were on the ground, they were in the pond, you know, so.
Yeah.
There are things you can do to enjoy birds that, you know, don't involve artificial feeding.
And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, birds congregating at feeders and baths can transmit disease to one another. They recommend that people cease feeding birds until this mortality event has concluded. Clean feeders and baths with a 10% bleach solution and avoid handling birds. And if you do, wear gloves. So
Yeah.
this is serious stuff. I mean, it's not as if birds aren't already having problems, and we're witnessing just the disappearance of so many birds. So to add this, it sort of reminds me of what happened to bats a few years ago, mysterious disease, the white nose syndrome, and that we still haven't really solved that problem. And you know, it's all pressure from one species, folks, basically, that causes these things. You can almost always trace it back to something we've done, and mostly it's loss of habitat, which is what you're encouraging with your book. Is like create habitat in your backyard.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Including the notorious pokeweed, and I need to get into that. I was out the other day and had the radio on, and Poke Salad Annie came on, and I thought, all right, I'm talking to Nancy Lawson this Sunday, and what a great song. Gator got your granny, chomp, chomp, chomp. And tell us about. I am one of those people who, to this point, and I'm going to change now. There was pokeweed in our community garden here on the corner, smack in the middle of the city of Chicago. How did it get here? Probably a bird pooped it, is what I'm thinking. And I would tell people, oh, you got to dig that up. You got to get that out of here. This is, bad. Ooh, pokeweed. And you're saying not so much.
Yeah. I mean, pokeweed is an incredible food source for wildlife. Of all kinds. So giant leopard moths lay their eggs on pokeweed leaves, and syrphid flies go to the flowers. I haven't seen it, but I've read that hummingbirds go to the flowers. Foxes, opossums eat the berries, and migrating birds. So I have a really funny story from, not really funny, but interesting story from this past winter when we had painted buntings coming to a park in Maryland. And this is really unusual for them to come this far north. And people were posting pictures. It's a very wooded park, and they were posting pictures they took from afar so as not to disturb this little guy. It was kind of like across a river. And I started looking at the pictures, and almost every time this painted bunting was in the pokeweed. He was either perching in it or eating the berries, which were kind of desiccated, but I guess they were like pokeweed raisins to him. And so it's one of the most important food sources for migratory birds. There were like 15 identified by researchers at University of Rhode Island along the Eastern Flyway, and pokeweed was on the list as a good berry source. And I have to tell you too, my husband was in Germany at a conference a couple of years ago, and he went to the Botanic Garden, and the first thing he saw was this proudly displayed American pokeweed with a label and everything at the entrance.
Unbelievable.
So,
We're ripping it out here, and in Europe, they're displaying it proudly.
Right there, you've got part of the problem, though. It's got weed in the name.
Yes, we should call it pokeberry, which some people do.
Right, and butterfly flower instead of butterfly weed, or
milkweed,
or milk flower, or whatever. We just attach the word weed because that's what a lot of folks did early, centuries ago sometimes, and we're stuck with it. And then people say, "Well, that's a weed, and we need to get rid of it." And the argument they make about pokeweed is, well, the berries are poisonous. Well, folks, all right, if you knew how many plants out there are poisonous, you wouldn't walk outside. You just, and even indoors. You know how many tropicals you have in your house? If you put those in your salad, you're going to keel over, okay? So that's life. That's nature. So we need to have a little more respect, because nature does have a purpose, and it's not just to kill human beings. In fact, often nature is not very good at doing that. So, but we're good at flipping it around. All right. Well, we need to take a break. I'm going to tell people when we come back. I'm going to show some quick photos from your yard and talk about some of the plants and animals that you have there. And then we're going to bring in a special guest. Well, if people read the reports I put out on social media, they know who the special guest is already. But it's a great story about an HOA, which is a homeowners association. And if any of you have ever been, brutalized by an HOA, you're going to appreciate this story. It's a woman who happens to be your sister, and who tried to plant a native garden, and the HOA said, "No, we need lawn." And the story,
we need chemicals.
We need chemicals. Yes, we need death and destruction. And what happened as a result. So stick around for that as well. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're talking critters in your yard, and we'll be right back.
You can help slow climate change in 2021 by composting. And you don't even need a backyard. By composting communally in multi-unit buildings across Chicagoland, Collective Resource Compost has diverted 7,000 tons of food scrap since 2010. CRC brings you a fresh 5-gallon bucket or a 32-gallon neighbor tote with each pickup. You fill it with organic matter, they swap it out, and get it to a commercial composting operation. Fight climate change. Go to collectiveresource.us.
whether you're a farmer or a backyard gardener. Assist your soil in providing key nutrients to your plants with Spectrum Soil Inoculum from Tineo Biologicals. The beneficial microorganisms in Spectrum break down and release vital nutrients and make them more accessible to your plants. Spectrum works with nature to decompose organic matter into humus, building richer, healthier soil. Spectrum is approved for use on certified organic crops and is OMRI listed. Get Spectrum at blazing-star.com. Hey, welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. That's Nancy Lawson. Let's hold up the book again. So folks, get a copy of this. You should. This is an excellent, excellent book. And it's one of those books that will change the way you think about gardening. There's a handful that I've read in my lifetime that have really affected me. This is one of them. And it's really easy to read. Nancy's not a scientist, but she is a journalist, and you write like a journalist, and we appreciate that. So,
and it's got a local connection in the book too.
Right,
Charlotte Edelman.
Thank you so much. Charlotte Edelman who's been on our show a number of times. I've been working with.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I've been working with her in Chicago on our stupid weed law, which fines people for growing native plants and praises them for putting poisons in grass seed down on their property. So
you still have that law?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh Lordy, looked like they were going to do a and for folks who are not aware of this, Alderman Hopkins had a native plant registry that he was trying to get through city council. Well, apparently the mayor, in her infinite wisdom, doesn't like that idea, and so that has been scrapped. And I don't know what our mayor thinks in terms of environment, pretty much nothing, as far as I can tell. We talked about this a few weeks ago when we had a couple of the former heads of the environment of the city of Chicago on this very program. I don't know what the heck she's doing, but so that has been scrapped, and so we're still stuck with, if there are any folks out there from the city watching, they could come and probably find me right now for the plants I have in my front yard. Good luck. Go for it. Of course, I shouldn't poke the bear, should I? At any rate, let's take a look at your yard. Nancy, by the way, as we mentioned, she wrote that book. You should get a copy of it. You can go to her website, which is it thehumanegardener.com or just humanegardener.com?
Just Humane Gardener.
Humane Gardener. And she also, Donna said Nancy also has a terrific Facebook page by the same name. Donna's writing in. And so I would advise you guys to take a look at it. So let's look at what your situation is. This is, as you say, no lawn. Look, Ma, no lawn.
Yeah. This is it was a new path that we made last year to a new stoop, and we put those branches down in a lot of places to line the path. So I consider that kind of stuff just as important as the actual plants themselves.
Sure.
Because no sooner did we do that than they started breaking down, and then the downy woodpeckers would come every morning and peck along the branches and get their breakfast. And so we leave all the leaves wherever they fall, because we don't have to worry about lawns since we don't have any. We have a little patch of sort of old grass that I keep encroaching upon with native plants.
Of course.
The little token grass patch, just for vintage sake.
Yeah. And more, as you can see, it's an easy way to take care of your lawn if you don't have one.
And so here I have a lot of plants that I had just planted actually the year before, and that's how much it filled in. And what I do is kind of just take over the space of old stilt grass and things like that, a little at a time. And then I let it all reseed. And then things like American burnweed come up along the edges. That's something people would usually pull. But here, what happens is the deer come by and they love American burnweed, and they love these little things that I let seed along the edge, like common evening primrose. And that gives them something to eat as they walk along. And that's how the animals tend to use these paths really a lot. The turtles, the deer, the rabbits.
Yeah, go ahead, Peggy.
Oh, I was going to say, as you were converting the lawn, what were you putting in first? What were like the first plantings?
Yeah, so first I was putting in actually seedlings that had seeded into the front pathways.
Ah,
And I needed more space to put them, so it was things like blue mistflower and sea oats and cardinal flower and
See, I
rudbeckias
wish
and a
I
lot
could
of
grow
the
cardinal flower. I don't have enough sun, for one
yeah.
thing,
oh
and
Mine
the
never come back. Same
and
thing. Not enough sun.
yeah, but I have great blue lobelia.
oh
Lobelia.
that does reseed really well,
Oh
right?
my goodness,
Yeah.
it just I've got huge patches of it in my backyard, and I love it. I think it's great. Well, what kind of trees are we looking at here?
So the tall whitish barked ones are tulip poplars, and this is the
Hmm.
site of my old vegetable garden. And the I kept on trying to pull the saplings out when I was growing vegetables there, and realized the sassafras loved it, the tulip poplars loved it.
Mhm.
So I decided just to let it all turn into woodland,
Why
and
not?
then behind it is an American smoke tree, the orange one, which is
Hmm.
just spectacular in the fall.
Yeah,
That I planted. Um,
and
yeah.
you didn't plant these guys, and
Yeah, and this I love so much because so this was the pond we made just last year, and this is a green frog and a bullfrog, and when you look at it, at first you think, oh, look at those little friends. Well, um, I thought it was probably a bullfrog, based on IDing it and on top, and I sent it to a herpetologist who confirmed and said, well, that bullfrog probably wants to eat that green frog, but the
oh
bullfrog
no,
probably isn't big enough yet. Yeah.
oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well. Speaking
So,
of that, and I don't. I'm gonna apologize for some reason. These photos are slightly out of focus, and I do not understand why. Because I just lifted them from the file.
Yeah. It's like
Uh,
they resized themselves or something.
I think they did. Something odd
okay.
happened. So my apologies for that. But are we going to be R-rated because of this photo?
I don't know, but this is the kind of thing you get to see when you have habitat.
That's true. And you have to say nobody hates frogs and well, maybe some people hate toads because I guess in certain parts of the country they can be thugs in the garden. Um,
Yeah.
but amphibians in general are always welcome. It's other critters that we have issues with, which are generally snakes and chipmunks and deer and rabbits, as I mentioned before. But you look at frogs and toads, everybody goes, "Yeah, we want frogs and toads in our."
Yeah.
And another
These are
thing.
wood frogs.
Oh, are
Yeah.
they? Okay.
Uh-huh.
And they are in the act, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I have these videos of them, a whole melee of them in the
Yeah.
pond. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, something I'm always taking photos of in my yard, although I have had very little success in finding eggs and never caterpillars. Monarch,
Yeah.
I do not, and I got a lot of milkweed in my yard now over the years. It has sprung up. In fact, if I ever sell this house, I'm going to have to issue a warning to whoever buys it and say, "Hey, you're going to see milkweed pop up all over the place. Just if you don't
Just
like
don't tell them about the cup plants. That's all.
Right. Well, you're going to see
Yeah.
cup plants come back too. If you don't like it, just in milkweed, I just cut it down wherever it shouldn't be. But
Yeah.
obviously, you have a few monarchs around.
Yeah.
This one is hard, and like because of the again because of the focus. But that's a beautiful hummingbird moth. Um, I get
Yeah.
those occasionally in my yard too. They're very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very cool, and they're people don't realize what they are oftentimes
Well,
because they're day flying moths too.
yeah.
And they're
This
big.
Yeah, and this one is maybe the coolest fly ever. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. It's like it just woke up and it hasn't combed its hair yet. This is crazy.
I love it too. I know. I love it's so cute.
A
Taconid
taconid,
fly. Yeah.
right? Taconid fly.
That can fly.
Um, and this is not from your husband, but this is a turtle. Um,
This is a turtle. Yeah, one with that we watched just 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah,
yeah,
laying
and
her eggs.
oh, really? Oh my goodness!
So
Well,
See,
this
you get to
this
see.
picture, she's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, you go ahead.
uh,
Oh, she's on her way down the path, and she explored multiple nesting sites till she
Uh-huh.
found one in the wood chips. Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Um,
Nancy, as you converted your yard into a habitat, how long did it take for a lot of these critters to start appearing? I mean, were they there right away? Was it the next year? What were you noticing?
Um, I think they were there right away for sure, like that early monarch caterpillar and the sparrows and the
But
switchgrass.
the turtles, the
But
amphibians.
yeah, well, so turtles typically have the same home range their whole life. So we had turtles, and they just didn't have any habitat, and they didn't have any place to hide. And as I think I mentioned in my book, actually one got mowed, and
Hmm.
that's a horrible,
Yeah.
yeah, horrible situation because you can't afford to lose any turtles. You know, they're
Mhm.
so
no.
population is so fragile, and it happens all the time, and people hit them on our road with cars. So I'm really trying to raise awareness about that. I mean, they've managed to make it for so many millennia because of their protective shells, but we have this equipment now that hurts them. So we had animals here. They just didn't. They were just in peril. You
Yeah.
know.
Uh,
As far as insects, I guess it only took the first patch of native plants.
Yeah.
that helps.
So,
What's
Plant
this?
it, they will come.
What is the bird we're
yeah.
looking at?
This is a northern flicker, and
Hmm.
we have these really cool videos of the flickers under the maple tree here, in the leaves, just drilling away for the ants and the beetles, and so that's a big reason to leave the leaves too. It's amazing to see the birds foraging in there. There's lots of caterpillars and
Right.
pupae in there. So.
And everybody's arch enemy, the chipmunk.
Oh no, he's my best friend. So this is Mr. Chippy. He was always here during COVID. I would go out on the patio, and he would sort of appear from behind the retaining wall, and he would do things like nibble a snail and leave me the shell, like he was at a crab feast,
Yeah.
leaving all his stuff around. And they don't. We just are delighted by them. I don't. They have a little burrow in the patio garden, but I don't. I don't notice any problems with it at all. In fact, it creates more habitat. Cicada wasp killer made her nest on top of the chippy burrow last year.
The Chippy bird, Mr. Chippy. All right, and now here's photographs, which brings us to our next guest. This is a yard that is, well, if you ask me, it's a disgrace. It's just.
Look at all those flowers. They're too tall.
I know, really. I mean, what does this person think she's doing? And we should probably bring that person in here now. So there she is in the lower right-hand part of your screen. That's Janet Crouch. And you guys are sisters, huh? So you're both troublemakers, right?
Yep.
Welcome, Janet, to the show, and we're so excited to hear about your story. I'm going to introduce the story by way of the video that you put together, which is there's no soundtrack to it. You can read it as it's going by. There's titles there. So I'm going to leave our mics open so that we can comment on it as it goes by. Is that okay with you?
That sounds great. But I would like to say that Mike Pugh, who lives in Virginia and also battled his HOA, put it together. I met Mike on social media, and he is just fabulous. So shout out to Mike Pugh, who made the video.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to find the audio here. There it is, and we can start this. And folks, I think will find this entertaining. And there they are. There's the lovely couple there in their own garden. And that's a photo you saw a second ago. A little bit of everything. It's a lovely garden, I have to admit.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not all native. There are annuals.
Uh-huh. And then you got this. Oh, my God. Intimidating and surprisingly vicious emails? What?
Shocking emails, yes.
Really? I mean,
yes.
that doesn't sound very professional to me.
It was extremely unprofessional.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Pesticide-free plants. Ah! Oh. What's next? Nature? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So.
And did they even know?
Know what?
Oh, the other board members, did they even know that this law firm was doing it?
You know, that's a really good question. I think they knew generally, but I've gotten the sense that they did not read the communications that came to us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know for certain, but it seemed to sort of happen in a vacuum with just a few people who were part of the HOA board.
And they spent $100,000 in fighting your garden, which is nuts, which is
Right.
it is, and fighting these photographs and videos of butterflies and bees and beautiful plants. Some of them, as you say, native, and others native. And the idea was that, and I have it written in my blog post, they wanted a lawn. They came out and pretty much said it.
Yes. They directed us to replace our entire garden with turf grass. And we had our garden for about 15 years before we got the first threatening letter from the HOA.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a new garden. It's in our front yard. They were aware of it. But one neighbor, we came to find out later, had complained. And he'd complained anonymously for a number of years, and they apparently ignored his complaints. And then he started using his Assistant Inspector General for investigations of the Legal Services Corporation, which is a congressionally funded quasi-governmental agency, email address to send complaints about us and our property to the board. And he made some sort of alliance with the HOA attorney. He was communicating with him directly, and it all spiraled from there.
And I'm kind of fascinated by how nasty they were about this. That's the part that stuns me, that here you had this garden and they didn't just say, look, it's violating the HOA guidelines. What if they had been nice about it? Would you still have fought them this hard?
We certainly probably would have been able to come to some sort of agreement much earlier on. Nancy and I and my husband participated in a so-called hearing before the HOA board in September of 2018. And we tried to talk to them sort of offline, which our attorney recommended that we do around the table in the meeting room. But Sean Suhar, the HOA attorney, told me to shut up, yelled at Nancy to be quiet.
I mean, he said it in so many words. He said, shut up.
Oh, he said it directly. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, he yelled it at me to shut up when I was trying to talk to a board member. Yeah.
And
so it became clear then, Mike, that they were not interested in he wasn't at least settling.
This is my favorite part, I think. The attorney used quotes around words and concepts he apparently viewed as suspicious, such as, quote, garden, and wrote disparagingly of the Crouch's, quote, environmentally sensitive agenda. Ooh, that's scary. Oh, my goodness.
Pesticide-free growth of plants. Right.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yeah, we were the bad guys.
You crazy lefty pinko commie. Oh, nature friendly. I don't even know what to say.
How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. So they're nasty, they're mean, and you say, okay, we're going to take them on. And how long did that court battle last?
We didn't file in court until almost 2 years after they started coming after us. We hired an attorney immediately, and we found that that's difficult to do because there are very few attorneys who represent homeowners in these battles against HOAs. HOAs have so much power.
Yeah.
So we thankfully found a great law firm, Skipper Law in Crofton, Maryland, who helped us out. But we would go months and months in between getting communications from them. In the meantime, people going by our house all the time, taking pictures. It was extremely traumatic.
When you say taking pictures, to prove something, to catch you.
Something, right? What? Who knows?
Oh my goodness.
Well, and there was, because Nancy, you wrote this up on your blog, which I just posted the link. They were saying things like 6-foot butterfly statues and all sorts of weird things.
Yeah. I mean, I was at that hearing and they just let the neighbor come in and go through this outrageous, fantastical list. And the lawyer also, when we would challenge certain phrasings in the letter, obviously, the initial letters to Janet and Jeff were just pulled excerpts from other threatening letters they had used. They weren't customized at all. And
oh my
so
gosh.
It said things like, your garden is attracting mosquitoes and stuff. And so we brought this up and we brought up like why a native plant garden helps with that actually. And the lawyer, Sean Suhar, said, I said mosquitoes? I never said that. And we're like, here's the letter right here with your name on it. Yeah. And so it was that kind of farcical situation that at first made us think we'll be able to fight this. And then the community, just the board members just didn't, like you said, Peggy, didn't know what was going on and didn't care. And
yeah, that's the bad part. I mean, not knowing that's your first crime, because as a board member, anybody who's ever been on a board knows that there's a responsibility that you have to be aware of what's happening, and you can be held liable for that and accountable. And so then you find out later that they didn't really even know how much money was being spent on this. Is that right, Janet?
It doesn't appear that they did. The numbers in the portal that board members have access to were very confusing. They didn't like to talk about it. They like to talk about parking and trash cans and the board meetings. And whenever I would bring this up, sort of the meeting would end and that would be the end of it. So
yikes. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So
flash forward.
Yeah, you take it to
so
court.
Flash forward. Yes, we take it to court. Well, so we had a pretrial hearing which showed us that it's a crapshoot in court. So we ended up settling our case and retaining most of our garden. But the best thing that came out of it is that we got a state law passed. And
wait, now you're skipping steps. I mean, you know, what a state.
List 11, Mike.
I know, but a state. Well, you're not going to get to tell the whole story, but the state law didn't appear out of nowhere. Obviously, while you were working on this court case, you were talking to legislators as well, right?
Yes. So through connections that I made on Facebook, I talked to a lot of different people who'd gone through similar situations, difficult situations with their HOAs or community associations. And someone suggested that I contact our state legislators, which I did. And then my husband and I started attending local environmental events to try to meet them. And we did at one event, a Bee City event in September. And then in October, somebody from a legislative aide from our local delegate's office, Terry Hill, reached out and said that they were interested in introducing legislation. So Nancy and I worked with Mary Catherine Cochran, who worked for Terry at the time, and it was introduced in 2019 to 2020 session, and it was doing really well going through the legislature, but then COVID hit. So it was introduced again this year and passed almost unanimously. It will be going into effect October 1st. The governor didn't sign it, but he didn't veto it. So it will go into law effective October 1. So that was our main goal with that, was to ensure that no other families have to go through what our family had to endure at the hands of an HOA just for trying to responsibly garden and help the planet.
And don't worry, I'm in control of the time here. So if we slop over the top of the hour, it's not a big deal. But so before we go, what does the law state? What is now the law of the land in Maryland?
That low impact HOA boards cannot restrict homeowners from planting low impact landscaping. Which includes pollinator gardens. Nancy, what are some of the other?
Rain gardens. They called it biohabitats. And they can't, it says in the law too, that they can't require turf grass.
I like that. Give that a ding.
That was was the main thing. Yeah. That would have saved us 3 years ago when all of this started.
Oh my goodness.
They wouldn't have been able to demand that.
So this is what I love about this story, is that you get one cranky guy, and that's the way these things often work. One dumb, cranky jerk gets a bee in his bonnet, no pun intended, and we wish that would happen, actually.
One grouch.
Right. And as I wrote on my blog, it was Crouch versus Grouch. All right, is what we had here. And so it backfires, it blows up in his face, and now the entire state gets to benefit from his intransigence. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story, Janet. It really, really, and it couldn't have happened, though, unless you guys fought, and that's the important thing. You didn't take it lying down. You didn't say, all right, we'll just put in the lawn. Thank you for standing up for plants, for animals, for habitat. This is, and I hope it becomes a model law across the country. Wouldn't that be cool?
It most certainly would, and thank you. Yes. No, I didn't get to be 54 years old to lay down and have an HOA take control of my life.
Oh, my goodness. I absolutely get that. And so people who are in HOAs all over the globe, rise up, folks. Rise up.
Absolutely.
Because I know some HOAs that are pretty tyrannical. Listen, thank you both for being on the show today. Nancy, the Humane Gardener, go to humanegardener.com. You can go to her Facebook page. You can pick up her book one more time. Let's get the cover out there, The Humane Gardener. It was written 6 years ago, but it's a terrific book, and I'm sure there's plenty of copies still available. And Janet Crouch, congratulations on your victory in court and in the Maryland General Assembly. What a great thing. What a great story. You know, we don't get a lot of positive environmental stories in the world. So it reminds me of the one we just had in Illinois, the Right to Garden bill that got passed in the Illinois General Assembly because a woman was being prohibited from growing vegetables under a hoop house in her backyard. She took it to the General Assembly. They said, well, that's crazy. And they passed the law. I love the way that when it works that way. So, so thank you both. You guys have a wonderful Sunday, and I hope we talk again very, very soon.
Thanks
so much, and Peggy.
Environmental stewardship. It's got a ring to it. I mean, it sounds important, and it is. You know, for over 100 years, Bartlett Tree Experts has been committed to maintaining a healthy environment and still providing you with the landscape that you had always hoped for. But creating a sustainable landscape with a natural-based approach, it takes time and oversight. And it starts at the beginning, choosing the right plant and knowing how to care for it. You ever hear the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure? Well, that applies to your landscape as well. We can help you choose trees or shrubs that are naturally more resistant to certain pests and diseases. So, plain and simple, fewer pests, fewer diseases, less treatments needed. But environmental stewardship doesn't stop here. Once your landscape's in place, we need to keep it healthy and thriving. So what can you do? Applying a layer of organic mulch around your trees will help to improve the root environment. Providing irrigation based on the species of the tree and the amount of rainfall that you've had can help alleviate stress from dry weather and high temperatures. What can we do? Soil care. Soil care is the most important preventative measure in maintaining tree health, which is why we offer Boost Natural Fertilizer, a fertilizer totally derived from organic sources that is listed by the Organic Materials Review Institute, or OMRI for short. Another organic soil amendment we provide is Premium Landscape Biochar. This unique carbon-rich charcoal can improve your soil's ability to retain nutrients and water, stimulating growth and making your plants less susceptible to insects and disease. But even with the best laid plans, problems can still arise. And especially when using a natural approach to tree care, issues must be identified early in order for the treatments to really work. That's why regular visits with a skilled arborist are so important. Whether we're applying organic or reduced risk products, or releasing beneficial insect predators like the lady beetle, timing is key. So as you can see, Bartlett Tree Experts has always been in the forefront of providing sustainable techniques. So if you're committed to environmental stewardship, let us provide you with organic and environmentally responsible methods that really work.
Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio with just a soupçon of humor. Or is that a dash? Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, rutabaga. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawn serene.
Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Just a reminder that this is not a live program today. This is a previously recorded show. I'm just popping these things in for you. I'm not really here. You can't see me. And Peggy, of course, is not here. Rick DiMaio is not here today either, but all of us will return next Sunday, September 12th, when our guest will be the fabulous Melinda Myers. So get your gardening questions ready. Meanwhile, let's go back to a show from July and MWRD Commissioner Debra Shore. So Peggy and Mike, take it away. Let us immediately go to our guests this morning because they're on kind of a time crunch, and I want to make sure that we give them all the time necessary to talk about an issue that we alluded to last week. A couple of weeks ago, an article came out by a guy named Dan Egan, who we have had on this program. He's an author and a writer, and it was in the New York Times, and it was an article about the city of Chicago, and it's, as I said in my blog post, uneasy relationship to water. And people who are on the coasts might think, well, that's really, the water problems are there. There are water problems on the oceans, and there are water problems inland where there is no water. And people might think, well, Chicago's got the best of both worlds, but not really. And to talk about this and other matters is Debra Shore, Commissioner for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. If you're watching us on the stream, you can see her in the lower left corner. Good morning, Debra.
Good morning, Mike and Peggy. Delighted to be with you this morning.
It's always such a pleasure to have you on the show, and we're so honored that you do this for us. You've always been a good friend to the program, and when I announced that you were going to be on the show, I had a number of people write, "Oh, that's so good because she's so smart and she knows her stuff." And you've been on the board of the MWRD since 2006, and I don't think that was the exact point that the change began, but there's something to be said for around that time getting people who weren't just politicians, but people who actually cared about water issues to serve on the MWRD, which is probably the most important agency that many people don't know about. With a $1.2 billion budget, you're nodding because you write about that, don't you, Debra?
I do, Mike. I send out occasional electronic newsletters and produce an annual report. They're up on my website, which is debrashore.org. And it's been a propitious time. I joined the board, as you noted, in late 2006. The Water Reclamation District got authority for stormwater management in Cook County only at the end of 2004. So it really began a new way of entering people's lives, often unfortunately through basement backups or flooding, these intense rainstorms, which is the way climate change is expressing itself in our region.
Yes, and I didn't realize that it had been so recently that the agency was entrusted with that responsibility. So thank you for that.
And who was responsible for stormwater before that, if I can ask really quickly?
Sure, it was the purview of Cook County government, but the district kept getting complaints about flooding, had to deal with it, and over a period of years persuaded the county to relinquish that authority, and it took an act of the state legislature to transfer that authority with a very modest amount of additional taxing authority to the Water Reclamation District. So now it manages two of the three legs of our freshwater ecosystem, namely used water and rainwater.
Yeah, and I see a parallel there to something I just mentioned, which was this recycling in Chicago, that is turning that responsibility over to an agency that is entrusted with that and whose sole purpose is to deal with that. In Chicago, wouldn't it be great if recycling and environmental matters could be turned back over to the Department of the Environment, which used to exist, rather than spreading it out among all of the other agencies and departments in the city where often it gets buried and they don't know what to do with it. So thank you for that information. Now, on our lower right there is your colleague, Justin Hart, who's a science and policy advisor for Commissioner Shore. He's he has a master's degree from the University of North Carolina School of Public Health. You've worked with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, and Wisconsin State Laboratory of Hygiene on Great Lakes water topics. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Good morning, Mike and Peggy. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you both, because we want the commissioner here, but we also want the science guy here as well. You always want the science guy behind the scenes. So let's get. And by the way, I'm remiss if I don't mention that Deb Shore, when I mentioned that you had a background in water policy before this, you were a founding editor of Chicago Wilderness Magazine. And you worked in Habitat, helped found Friends of the Forest Preserves, and on and on. So that's.
And you're a kayaker, right?
That's correct.
So you're out there in nature doing it, and those are the people you want. So let's get to this story that came out that Dan Egan wrote, and you and I went back and forth a little bit about this, Debra, about how you kind of called it, I don't think these are the exact words, but you said it was hopeful. I thought it was fascinating and informative for people who don't understand why Chicago has any water issues at all. And at least one of my listeners thought it was a slam. So it hit a nerve for the people of Chicago. Why do you think that was, Debra?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Dan Egan for a thoroughly researched, well-written, and comprehensive article. The graphics are stunning. It's deeply informative, and I hope everyone takes the time to read it, because you'll learn things.
And let me mention at this point that it is on my blog post. I put the link there so folks can go to Mike
putting
Nowak.
It up right now in the feed too.
Okay, great. And by the way, those of you watching on the YouTube feed, starting today, because of something I learned this week, the comment section will stay up there. So Peggy's notes should stay up there too with the links. So continue, Debra.
Yeah,
what was that, Peggy?
I was going to say, this is a New York Times article. It might be behind the paywall for some people.
Right. Okay.
But I recommend it highly. It's a wonderful history of Chicago's growth, because it's completely related to its location and to water. I think what was not stated as explicitly is that it's also a story of human enterprise, of innovation, of adaptation, of people living in a low-lying, swampy area on the banks of a sluggish prairie river, the Chicago River, that flowed into Lake Michigan and does still, and how, as the metropolis grew, because of its location, and because it could be a connection between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River system, it became a national hub for transport of goods. And yet most cities next to water have some degree of slope so that water can flow downhill and their wastes flow away from them when they dump them into waterways. Chicago's challenge was that people dumped all manner of human and animal and industrial waste into the Chicago River, which and now an idea to put sewage and other contaminants into your drinking water, and people were getting sick. So part of the human enterprise was coming up with a plan to dig a canal from the south branch of the Chicago River to the Des Plaines River, to build a lock and use water from the lake to reverse the river and push our waste downstream away from the city. And it worked. It allowed Chicago to become a great metropolis. And yet it also caused some other problems. It connected the Mississippi watershed with the Great Lakes, allowing invasive species to move in both directions along this man-made highway. No one thought people would want to canoe or kayak or fish or even swim in what in 1900 was dug as a route for barge traffic and a conveyance for human sewage. And yet, over the years, we now treat our sewage. We don't put raw sewage as much as possible into the waterways, except for occasional storm overflows. And now it's a much healthier waterway. But that was a 20th century solution, even a 19th century solution to a public health problem. We now need to come up with 21st century solutions to the challenges we face.
Yeah, something that you sent me, Justin, that you talked about, Debra, the other day was a guy named Steve Johnson who wrote a book, How We Got to Now, 6 Innovations That Made the Modern World. I've got a link to that also at my website. And he writes, we rarely think about it, but the growth and vitality of cities have always been dependent on our ability to manage the flow of human waste that emerges when people crowd together. From the very beginnings of human settlements, figuring out where to put all the excrement has been just as important as figuring out how to build shelter or town squares or marketplaces. And this is the kind of thing that people really don't want to talk about. They don't want to mention this. And as we get to 9 billion people in the middle of this century, we're going to need to talk about this more and more. And it's something, Debra, that you and I have talked about before in terms of biosolids, which, and that's a cute term for human waste. And how do you treat biosolids so that they can become fertilizer or have other uses? And I have known in my years doing this a lot of people who said, no, we can't do that. They're toxic, and I say, well, what's your solution then if you don't treat those? And this is something that you also deal with at the MWRD, right?
That's correct. So sewage is both liquid and solid waste. It's conveyed through pipes to 7 wastewater or sewage treatment plants that the district operates throughout Cook County. The solid wastes are separated from the liquid waste and treated, and the higher quality liquid waste is discharged into the Chicago waterways, and the solid waste, we now are mixing much of it with wood chips from the city and producing a high quality compost that can be used. It's available free of charge at our treatment plants for individuals to live on. There's a lot of nutrients in it. And due to what we call a pre-treatment program, where the district's pollution control officers go out to various industries and factories and work with them so that heavy metals and other constituents that used to contaminate the industrial waste coming into our treatment plants no longer does so. Instead, it's kept and treated at the factory or industrial site so that the proportions of heavy metals and other things in the solids is far lower than the standard, and we surpass in terms of low level those on our website. And be a wonderful source of nutrients, a soil amendment used on golf courses, athletic fields, park districts, and available to consumers.
Yeah, and Milorganite has been doing this for decades, and they have set the gold standard for this, and they dealt with issues like heavy metals. In fact, they shut down their factories in the mid-90s for a time just so they could fix that problem. A lot of people, I get what I call the Milorganite question all the time, which is, is it safe? And my answer is, yeah, you should use it. But it's up to you. There are a lot of different kinds of fertilizer out there. And again, if we don't figure out a use for our biosolids, we're going to be swimming in them. So what I want to get to here is have you, Justin, maybe walk us through some graphics that you sent to me the other day so we can give folks an idea of what's going on with the water flow in Chicago. You can read that article by Dan Egan. That's a good way to do it. But you also have, yes, Peggy.
I was going to say, just to put another little context around Dan's article, it's talking about the acceleration with climate change on the effect of Chicago.
Right, and that we will certainly get to that. But all right, so here is the first graphic that you sent me, Justin. Tell us what we're taking a look at here.
Sure. So I also would like to say, Dan Egan did a great job of describing this system in his article and would also recommend it. And this is just another way to look at what he was describing and what those images were showing, just kind of as a cross section. So you can see the Chicago River in a way that you don't get to often. So here you can see this is the Chicago River under normal conditions where there isn't excessive runoff entering the river as it would during a storm. And so as Commissioner Shore mentioned, the Chicago area is very flat, and we know that water flows downhill. And so the water does not flow very fast because there is not a great slope. And one of the solutions to that is when these canals were dug was to pump in water from Lake Michigan to kind of shove that water along so that it goes downstream. So you can see that on the right-hand side, you've got Lake Michigan and you've got that arrow of the sluice gates open of water entering from the lake to the Chicago area waterway system, which includes the Chicago River, and kind of pushing that water along toward the left side of your screen. And along the way, you get the treated effluent from the water reclamation plants, and you get the natural flow from rivers like the North Branch of the Chicago River. And that all flows downstream, as Commissioner Shore was saying, to a dam and its powerhouse that generates electricity at Lockport. And one thing that I think is very notable about this image that you can kind of see, and it's not done to scale, but one of the issues that Dan Egan was describing was the difference in elevation between the river and the lake. And so you can see under normal conditions on the right-hand side, the lake is higher than the river, and this helps the water come in from the lake and push the river along. And then on the left-hand side, you can see that there is another drop between the river and where it goes over the dam. And as Egan was describing in his piece, there can be conditions where there is not much headspace between the river and the lake. But on the other side, there's about a 40-foot drop. So there's much more vertical capacity downstream toward the dam side. And so with the water flowing that way, it's a much more reliable way to relieve floods by having the water flow down toward Lockport.
Yeah, and so this looks perfectly normal. It is a little scary to see all of that water on Lake Michigan higher than, but that's the way it was engineered. That's what they did 100 years ago in Chicago to make sure that gravity took effect and took that water.
And
yes, Peggy.
Just asking for our listeners, those sluice gates or the locks, where exactly are those located?
Sure, that's a great question. They're at 3 locations. One is at Wilmette, kind of by the Baha'i Temple. Right behind there is a controlling works. It's not a lock as you'd find in the other 2 spots, which are right downtown, where the Chicago River, kind of by the Riverwalk, where the Riverwalk meets the lake. Those are locks there, and that's where the lake is also entering the river. And then the 3rd location is down by the Port of Chicago on the Calumet River. And at those 3 locations, Lake Michigan is water enters the system and pushes the river water along downstream toward the Des Plaines River.
Okay, so we move on then. So that is normal conditions here. And then we have moderate conditions. What has changed, Justin?
Sure. So you're seeing that there's a new source of water that's entering the Chicago area waterway system, and that's combined sewer overflow. And so when it rains, sometimes there is more rain entering the sewer system than the sewer system can handle, or that the treatment plants can treat at one time. And when that happens, the pipes fill up, and once they are full, the way of relieving that pressure, instead of having that go into people's basements, and it exits through these outfalls, these combined sewer overflow outfalls into the river. And so the excess water is pumped into the river rather into people's homes and basements. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and you can see on the right that the river, Chicago River, is slightly higher than the level of Lake Michigan, but it's being held behind the sluice gates because they're closed at this point.
Correct. And you're also seeing the water that's coming in from the tributaries and the water reclamation plants is also larger than it would be under normal conditions. And the way that the elevation in the Chicago River is maintained is through that dam. And so you're seeing that there's kind of this tilt because more water is being rushed through that dam to try to lower the system and relieve that flood pressure from the upstream.
All right. And now the Dyer level is pictured in this graphic. This is probably what we had going last year. Is that right, Justin?
Yes, this would have been similar to the conditions that Dan Egan was describing in his article for May of last year. One difference would be, this graphic is kind of describing average level or average extreme storm conditions. So to say that Lake Michigan here is lower than it would have been in the article that he is describing. And so those lines would be much closer to each other. And so what's going on here compared to the last one, you saw that the water was close to the height of the barricade between Lake Michigan and the river, but it didn't exceed it. Here, there's just so much water that's entering. It's a major storm that the river is rising faster than it can be dumped out through the dam. And instead, again, we're trying to the engineering is trying to prevent water from entering people's homes and basements and flooding downtown. The other way to relieve that pressure in the system is unfortunately to dump the water into Lake Michigan. And again, water flows downhill, so there needs to be a difference in elevation between the height of the river and the height of the lake. And the river needs to be higher than the lake for that to happen.
Wow. And that's kind of what we were dealing with last year when we had the wettest May ever, which followed the wettest May the year before, which followed the wettest May the year before. And then, of course, this year we had very little rain in May. In fact, we are still in drought conditions, as we will be talking about with meteorologist Rick DiMaio, in certain parts of the area, including the northern part of Illinois, southern part of Wisconsin. Which takes us to the question that Peggy raised, which is climate change and how much that is affecting what is happening here. Debra, do you want to address that?
Sure, I'll try to. I want to just add one fact to Justin's description of how the system works, and that is that the height differential between where the Sanitary and Ship Canal begins at the south branch of the Chicago River, and then 26 miles of canal to join the Des Plaines River at Lockport, where there is that hydroelectric dam. It's only 6 feet of difference. That's not a lot of slope. So you can understand that it takes quite some time for water to move from the main stem in downtown Chicago 26 miles to Lockport. I have called that the audacity of slope, the idea of digging with slope because they wanted it to serve for commercial barge traffic and navigation and so forth. But that poses a problem too when you try to release more water at Lockport to give the whole system more capacity to hold water
Yeah.
in a rainstorm.
Yeah, we
Now,
do have
to
one question here, Deb. Someone was
Sure.
asking, what's the downstream impact if the dam at Lockport has overflow?
Well, the dam doesn't overflow. They can control the release through various gates at Lockport. But we have seen in years past, very high water levels in the Mississippi, due not to release at the Lockport Dam, but heavy rainfall throughout the upper Mississippi watershed, where barge traffic was closed for weeks at a time by the Army Corps because of dangerously high water levels and flows in the entire Mississippi watershed. But we have not seen increased flooding when there are high flows at Lockport into the Des Plaines.
All right, now this takes us, and we're doing, this is a crash course in what the MWRD deals with. And by the way, folks who think we're going to break at 9:30, we're not. We're going a little bit further so I can let Debra Shore go and Justin, let them get out of here and get on with their Sunday. But one of the ways that you've mitigated this is with the TARP project, which a lot of people call deep tunnel. And my standard joke, and I have to say it every show, is that deep tunnel empties into my basement. And I apologize.
Not once, but twice.
Yeah, and I won't even do the rim shot. And the reason I say this is because was my basement several weeks ago. And that was water this was 5 days after I had standing water in the basement, had the basement rotted, and then we got 4 inches of rain. I think 4.5 in my yard. It was in that neighborhood in afternoon, and there was a tornado warning in Chicago, sirens going off and that sort of thing. And they said, go to your basement. Kathleen and I go down in the basement. I grab Legata the cat. We go to the basement, and then the water starts bubbling up. And I said, "We're going back upstairs, folks. I don't care. We'll take our chances on the first floor." Now, there's not a lot of
that bloop, bloop, bloop.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a lot of standing water, as you can see there, but it's always disconcerting to see sewage coming up into your basement, into your home. And then you have to deal with that when it's done. So I want to show this amazing video, and thank you, Justin, for sending this to me. This is the McCook Reservoir, and I've been there because I was there with you, Debra, when it opened at the end of 2017. I remember that chilly December day because I had a nasty cold and I didn't want to go, but I really wanted to see it. And would you explain, I'll leave our mics on as we're watching this. Either one of you can explain exactly what we're seeing here.
So this is phase 1 of the McCook Reservoir, which was dug, it's off of I-55, and it was dug from ground level 300 feet down. It can hold, I believe it's 3.5 billion gallons of stormwater overflow. And that's 3.5 billion gallons that goes into this huge reservoir instead of going into people's basements or causing flooding. And in the space of about 20 hours, during a major storm, this is where the main stem of the tunnel empties into this reservoir to give it more capacity. And phase 2 of the McCook Reservoir will hold 6.5 billion gallons of stormwater.
Wow.
It is being dug now and will go online in 2029. And that will really help relieve flooding.
And I'm playing this again because watching it fill up, I don't know about you, it's kind of terrifying. And I know it's a time lapse, but what'd you say, 3 billion gallons?
3.5 billion, I believe.
Yeah, and when you see
In
go up
less
there,
than 20 hours.
and when it gets to the top like that, I imagine there's a sluice that's closed at that point, so it can't overflow. Because I look at that and I think of my basement. It's like, how far can this go? It's just remarkable the way this fills up. But this, even as you say, there's going to be more capacity. But even when that's done, is that going to be able to handle climate change events that happen in our area?
No, because, and I'm sorry to say that, and I want to make 2 points. One is, when we think about tornadoes and hurricanes, we know we can try to prepare for them and take some measures to buttress our homes and protect ourselves, but we can't prevent them. And some of these intense rainstorms that we have experienced and that we will experience are akin to a tornado or a hurricane in terms of a natural event, a natural disaster. We can prepare for them, but we can't prevent them. And unfortunately, because we invest in our sewer infrastructure and our stormwater infrastructure, we think, well, I paid for that, it ought to handle it. But the truth is, our sewer systems below the streets of our villages and cities is designed to handle what's called a 5-year storm, not a 100-year storm. And so the capacity of the local pipes to handle these intense dumps of rain, as you mentioned, 4 inches in a short period of time, that overwhelms the capacity of our local sewers to even convey that water to the larger reservoirs, to the deep tunnel drop shafts. So it's a structural issue. And the challenge is, how do we find ways to slow the flow into our sewers to give them the capacity that they need to do the job? How do we capture rain where it falls and even keep it out of the sewers by using rain gardens and rain barrels and large cisterns and green roofs and vegetated ditches along roadsides, all kinds of ways called green infrastructure to capture rain, either keep it out of the sewers and allow it to recharge our underground water supply, or to slow the flow so that the sewers can do what they were designed to do.
And this is what you're looking at. You have a new 5-year plan out following the previous 5-year plan. And Justin, this is another thing you sent me. And this is kind of a simple graphic that shows the runoff and infiltration in the first panel on the left. And then in the middle, you can see that if there's too much runoff, you get urban flooding because of the limited pipe capacity. And then you're looking at an additional place to store water, which can mitigate urban flooding. Is there anything else you would add to that, Justin?
Sure. I would just say that this is a scheme that has been kind of come up with by some very bright and capable engineers who work at the MWRD. And this is kind of a new approach that they're taking to kind of bring more people into the conversation, because some of the terms that are used to describe storms and flood conditions, you just heard Commissioner Shore talk about, a 5-year storm, a 100-year storm, that can be difficult to grasp. And so this is a new way of bringing that down to a metric that's that is easier for people to understand. It's easier to talk about, how many gallons of water do I need to capture so that my house doesn't flood? Yeah.
And that takes us to the storms we had in Europe the past few days, a few days ago. And some people are calling those 500-year or even 1,000-year storms.
1,000-year storms, yeah.
And a lot of folks say that, some folks said we didn't get warning. Other folks said we got the warning. There was just nothing we could do about it. There was no way to move that fast. And that's an extension of what I experienced with 4 inches of rain. So, what are you telling? What you're telling us, Debra, is that there was just so much rain that came down at once that even with the mitigation factors you had in place, they couldn't handle it. That's
right. And I think there are 2 other factors. One is we didn't used to finish our basements. And it was much more common decades ago for people to realize that basements might take on a little bit of water, and they had cement floors and drains, and it wasn't as disruptive or damaging to our lives and property. Our basements may need to take on water again. But the other thing is we've been paving over our landscape as we build out our homes and pave patios and build more and more big box stores and parking lots. We've given water nowhere to go. So part of the challenge is to create a distributed network of rain capture systems, neighborhood capture in large cisterns, much larger than a rain barrel, or removing some of that concrete skin that we've laid over the landscape and putting in permeable parking lots. How many of those very large parking lots are even ever completely full? So some of that overflow parking surface could be removed and replaced with a permeable parking lot. So that's the kind of major study I hope to undertake, and I hope our agency will, to look for opportunities throughout Cook County to capture water, help us become more resilient, and try to mitigate the damage that these storms cause.
Well, you talk about extended producer responsibility. I think we've got to start passing laws where the owners of these big box stores, which are billion dollar companies, are responsible for the water that it lands on their property, and that if that means permeable pavers, whatever, I don't care. The price is too high for cheap goods. Let me put it that way. The price we're paying is too high for cheap goods, and we need some responsibility. We don't get it from the mega corporations, pretty much. I'm going to be letting you go here in just a second. Justin, I want to give you a chance. Is there anything we've missed here that you were hoping to say on the program?
Sure. I guess one thing is, and thank you for this opportunity. This article by Dan Egan is just to tie it back to climate change. He's written about not only these high lake levels, but in 2013, the lake was also experiencing low lake levels. And he was also describing how that could also be attributed to climate change. And so as we think about the challenges that the city is facing, it's not only thinking about how flooding will occur, but also how climate change can also drive the lake level down and the challenges that the city faces from that. So just to hold both lessons in our minds as we read Dan Egan.
That's a really good point, because in 2013, people were complaining about how low the lake levels were. And that is part of the issue, isn't it, Debra? It is the variability, and Rick DiMaio, our meteorologist, talks about this all the time, climate variability. And unlike the ocean, as Dan Egan points out, which is going up all the time, it's not going down at all at this point. Our lake levels are going up and down, and that creates uncertainty, doesn't it?
It does, and while we have seen these fluctuations over time, they're happening more rapidly. The interval is much shorter between
and bigger
low
swings.
And at least that's what we've seen in the last decade. But think of it, over the surface of Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, they were 6 feet lower, roughly, in 2013 than now. That's trillions of gallons of water difference. Where does that water go? It's vapor in the atmosphere. And then it comes down in the form of these very intense rainstorms or elsewhere hurricanes and so on. It's all a system. That water is a finite resource, but it's a renewable resource.
Peggy, did you want to add something there?
I was just saying, and as we get less ice in the winter and there's more evaporation, leading to more water coming back down into our sewer systems.
Yep. And this is something we need to address. Well, I promised I would get you guys out of here, and that's what I'm doing. Thank you so much, Commissioner Debra Shore from the MWRD. Thank you, Justin Hart. I hope to have you guys back on the show again. This has been very enlightening, and I hope folks can. What kind of action would you take, Debra, if folks say, "Well, what can I do?"
Do a survey of your yard or building. Are there opportunities to install a rain garden, a rain barrel, a larger cistern, a green roof? The district will provide technical assistance. Contact my office, happy to help. Are there ways to, if you're needing to repave your driveway, or would you consider a permeable driveway or patio? All sorts of things like that.
I believe you have a permeable driveway, don't you, Debra?
It's coming.
Oh, okay. All right. And I have my rain barrels, but in a 2-inch storm, they fill up, boom, just like that. But if everybody had them, that's going to help.
And Marta just made a note, and bioswales.
Right. All right. Debra Shore, Justin Hart, thank you so much. You guys have a great Sunday, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Bye-bye.
So there we go. I want to thank our guests today, Nancy Lawson, who is the Humane Gardener, and her sister, Janet Crouch, and her battle against the HOA in Maryland, a successful battle. Also want to thank Commissioner Debra Shore from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, and Justin Hart, her Science and Policy Advisor. Thanks to Peggy, who's not even here. Thanks to Kathleen. Thanks to Lagata and Basil. I guess that's it. So until next time, go green or go home. I get to say that myself.
Stadler?
Yeah, what?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.